what I'm saying about this is when something grabs you like that,
Mm,
and I've had many experiences like this, but none as powerful as that. You
mm,
stay with it. You stay with it. Don't say
mm,
why. Shoot. It's like this ridiculous rule of thirds. Um,
mm.
if you, it's like saying this. We've thought this all out ahead of time. This has been
Yeah,
people thought it out over the decades and centuries. You just be a good boy, Martin, and you follow the
yeah,
rules. That's an
exactly.
insult to you.
If you're a photographer who feels that something is still missing in your work, your photographs are good but lack emotion and lack a personal style, this conversation is for you. You see, I recently sat down with one of the most remarkable photographers alive today. I thought we would probably talk for half an hour or so. Well, our discussion went on for almost 2 hours. So much so that we had to break this recording into 2 parts, both of which are worth your while, I promise you. But before you continue, I need to warn you, this is not a discussion you can put on double speed and sort of half listen to while you're doing something else. This is like sitting down with the finest whiskey that deserves your time. So if you are distracted at the moment or have too much going on, I recommend that you come back to this interview when you can give it the attention it deserves. Because if you don't, you're going to miss the DNA of what this is all about. Who is this photographer, I hear you ask? What his name is, Freeman Patterson. He is 88 years old and has spent most of those years either behind the camera or teaching workshops or writing one of his 12 books on photography and visual design. Freeman Patterson holds the Order of Canada, the highest honor a Canadian citizen can receive, and his work is in the permanent collection of the National Gallery of Canada. And listen to this. He has also received the Progress Medal from the Photographic Society of America, an award previously bestowed upon Ansel Adams and Edward Weston, among others, two of the greatest photographers who ever lived. But this is not what makes him interesting to me. I must tell you what makes him interesting to me is that he turned up one evening in 1980 at a tiny hotel in a place called Kamieskroon in South Africa. It's in the Northern Cape, right on the border of southern Namibia. There was one room left, and after dinner, the hotel owner decided to show her guests some of her slides. They were, in Freeman's own words, absolutely god-awful. Terrible, in fact, he said. He sat through every one of them and said nothing. He went to his room afterwards and came back with the last copy of his book that he had with him and left it with her. He said, I think this will help you, without telling her that he had written it. Now listen to this. That one evening led to 25 years of workshops at that very same hotel in the Namaqualand, 46 trips back to South Africa. Why? Well, you'll find out in the discussion. To give you some context, I first came across Freeman Patterson's work through a student of mine, Herbert Breuer. He returned from one of his workshops completely fired up. He handed me a couple of Freeman's books to look through, and I must say I connected with his teaching immediately. His thinking was so close to what I'd been saying in my own lecture room to my own students for years. So much so that I made his books recommended reading on my full-time photography program thereafter. Then last year, he visited Cape Town again, this time as the keynote speaker at a National Photography Congress where I was also asked to speak. Before the Congress, he paid a visit to our art gallery in Hout Bay. At the time, we were showcasing some of my students' work from my fine art photography masterclass. And here we met for the first time, and I offered to explain how the work was made, what techniques we used, and he said, rather not. In those 2 words, he confirmed 40 years of my thinking. In this conversation, we went to places I didn't expect. He speaks about 2 liver transplants he survived in the year 2000, 6 weeks in a coma, and 2 weeks from certain death, and how that experience found its way into his photography in ways he didn't even realize. And funny, he had something to say about the rules of composition that I think is going to make a few photographers feel quite uncomfortable. Throughout this discussion, you'll see some of Freeman's iconic work. Let his pictures sit with you. Let them make you feel uncomfortable enough that you do something about it. Part 1 is what you are about to watch. Part 2 is where this conversation goes somewhere neither of us had planned. Don't miss it. One more thing before we dive in. If this is the kind of conversation you want more of, subscribe to my channel and also sign up for the Osner Studio Atelier. You will find the link below, and there's a lot more interesting discussions like this coming up. Let us begin the first half of this conversation. Well, Freeman, it's wonderful to have you on this discussion. It's a great privilege and an honor on my side to have you come and chat with me. I must tell you, though, I got to know about you back in, I think it was sort of the late 1990s, where a fellow student who came on one of your workshops was also doing a full-time photography program with me. His name was Herbert Breuer, a German gentleman, but an absolute fanatic about photography. And I remember him walking in my office and saying he would like to go to a workshop and almost as if he needed my permission. And he never mentioned where it was going to be or what it was going to be. But I remember him coming back and he was so fired up. And he gave me a copy of a couple of your books, which he had managed to get. And and at that point, I mean, once I'd read some of your material, I was really blown away. It was fantastic, to the point that I also suggested that our college at that stage used it as recommended reading material for the students. So it's such a privilege. And then, of course, I got to meet you face to face recently when you were out in South Africa, having come through to the conference, and I got to meet you at our gallery when you came to visit. So it's, this is really a privilege to me. And I think I want to start off this discussion, if you don't mind, specifically with the South African connection, the connection you've got to South Africa, and specifically to the Namaqualand itself, southern Namibia, the Northern Cape, that sort of area. And I would like to quote you, if I could. There's a quote of yours here, and I actually loved it when I read it. It said, "Here and elsewhere in the southern Namib, you say that change occurs so slowly that I often feel like afternoon could be 2 million years ago, and it could be 2 million years in the future, as nowhere else I've ever been on this planet." And then you say, "I feel eternity." Wonderful quote. And I think for anybody who's been to the Namib, or who's been to Northern Cape or that area around Kamieskroon will know exactly what you mean. But I want to ask, what particularly drew you to that area of the Namib? What is the reason why you almost settled there? Because I know you taught there for many years in Kamieskroon.
Well, my very first visit to South Africa was in 1967. I was back again in 1969. And when I was in Joburg at that time, there were some photographers who were having an exhibition, and I went to it. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, I was invited by the Photographic Society of South Africa to make a few presentations at the 1972 Congress in Joburg. Okay. And then I was invited back again in 1976, and they asked me if I would gear my presentations this time to nature photography, which I did. I was quite happy to do that. And people at that Congress said to me, you should go to Namaqualand. You should go to Namaqualand. Well, not one of them who said this had ever been there herself or himself. It was very remote in those days because there was. So anyway, the third time I was invited to a Congress was in 1980. So after the Congress, a friend of mine in Joburg and I flew from Joburg to Uppington. And and there was no road across from Uppington at that point. So with this vehicle, we managed to drive on dongas and sheep trails and one thing and another until we got over to Achanis. And then we hit some tar and then a few flowers. And then we got to Springbok. And we spent a couple of days around Springbok. Well, the flowers were okay, but we were late. So we headed down on the third day, which was the 18th of September, 1980, a date in my personal history, to down the N7. And we went by Kamieskroon. We went out on a road toward Honda Clip Bay. And about 4:00 in the afternoon, we found some good flowers out there. I said to my friend Dirk, I said, look, Dirk, I said, we don't have any place to stay tonight. What do you think? He said, well, that last village that we went by, there's a little hotel sign. So I said, well, maybe we should go back and see if we can get a room. Well, as it turned out, they had one room left. There were 9 rooms in the hotel in those days. And so he went back and at dinner that night, Mrs. Swat, Carla Swat, who owned the hotel with her husband, she had inherited it from her dad. She announced she was going to show some of her slides on the walls of the Eatkamer, and this is something she'd never done before. But the other people in the hotel that night were on a little minibus from Cape Town, and they had come up to see the flowers, and they were disappointed in them. And the flowers, and one of their members was sick, so they decided to go back to Cape Town the next day. So she was showing these slides. So now, Afrikaans is the main language in that area, but everyone understood. So she was speaking English, and so I asked her if Dirk and I could stay and watch her slides. Well, she said, oh, absolutely. Now, the slides were absolutely god-awful. I mean, they really were terrible. And but the subject matter, I'm thinking, oh my heavens, if I could see flowers like that, I'd just give anything to see that. And so, but she knew that her pictures weren't very good, but she was taking no responsibility. She was blaming the camera for this, blaming the camera for that. Anyway,
did she know, sorry to interrupt, but did she know who you were?
No, not at all. And that's part of the story. So after dinner, I went back to my room. I had one copy of my second book, Photography in the Art of Speaking. And I took it back into the Eatkamer, and I said, Mrs. Swat, I said, you're having problems with your cameras, with your photography. And I said, maybe this book will help you. And I gave it to her. And I did not tell her I had authored the book. I did not tell her. So anyway, the next morning I'm eating breakfast. And I remember what I was eating. I remember the table I was sitting at and everything. And the door of the dining room bursts open, and Carla comes in, and she said, her name's Carla, short for Cornelia. She said, you're a professional photographer, and you sat through my slideshow last night, and I am mortified. And she said, I've canceled everything I have to do, which was one hell of a lot, for the next 2 days. She said, if you can stay for 2 days, I'll show you the best flowers we have left in Namaqualand this year. So I said, it's a deal. And by the time we went right up the Kamieskroon Pass, right behind the hotel the next morning. And I
know it well.
4 films by the time we got to the top of the pass. She thought I was out of my mind. She made a film due for her 1 full year. One film she put in December at Christmas, and then she'd replace it the following Christmas. So anyway, and I handed her a couple of films. Anyway, so after 2 days, I left. I taught her everything I could teach her in 2 days.
Right.
And then that was the end of it. And the following year, end of August, early September, I was sitting in my kitchen in Canada, and the phone rings, and it was a Canadian Pacific Telegraph office, that still telegraphs in those days.
Okay.
And the gentleman, when I answered, said, I have a telegram. And he said, would you like me to mail it to you, or would you like me to read it? So I said, well, please read it. Where's it from? He said, South Africa. I said, read it. And it was this: flowers superb, come at once, call a swat. And I had no choice. I mean, it mean, you've got to get here in a hurry.
Yeah.
And so, remember, this is 1980, and I called Air Canada, and one thing, I could only get a business class ticket. And anyway, I got a business class ticket. And when I flew by way of New York and Joburg, and then down to Cape Town. Anyway, and I shared the business class cabin with the Osmond family, the Dennis. And
I remember them.
Yeah, Marie Osmond. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, so I stayed for 3 weeks. And when I went to settle up, Cooney, called his husband,
Yes.
said, there's no charge. I said, what? I said,
For 3 weeks.
Your food for 3 weeks. He said, you've taught Kala too much. There's no charge.
Sure.
So I said, well, look, I said, this little hotel is the perfect place for workshops. You've got a nice hall, and you've got the dining facilities, you've got the rooms. I said, I want you to pay your way to Canada next year. That would have been 1982. And I said, and then I will look after you. But I want you to audit one of my Canadian workshops. So the following year they came, they audited a workshop. I flew them out to Western Canada, to the Rockies and so on.
Right.
And then the following year, 83, we had 2 workshops in Kamieskroon. Kala was a brilliant student, a very brilliant woman. In fact, she was the first woman in Namaqualand ever to have a university degree. And she, so anyway, I think we had 2 students on our first workshop, 4 on our second. The next year they were full, and they were plugged right through until she had to step aside in 2006. So I taught there for a quarter of a century, workshops. And then after that,
incredible.
COVID hit, I went back in March, February, March, and we did wilderness camping tours at the coast and in the Richtersveld.
Yes.
So, but I've had 50 trips now to South Africa, 46 of them to Namaqualand. And I think I've spent about 8.5 years of my life.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And the area itself, I mean, I know it well. I must also tell you that about that time when Carlo was retiring from the teaching, around the 2006 mark, I went on a trip up through Namibia to photograph specifically for my old abandoned collection of photographs that I was busy shooting. So old broken down things, whether it's motorbikes or cars, but things that have just been left abandoned and they organically still beautiful. And we actually stayed there, myself and my family. We stayed there for a night or two on the way up to Namibia.
Oh,
And
did
in the
you?
back, yeah, and Carla wasn't there. I don't think I actually know. I never met her then at
She
that stage.
retired to
Yeah,
Piquetbach, and her daughter,
yeah,
Morena,
yeah,
her husband took over. And
yeah.
the room, I think, or the hotel at that point had been expanded to 23 or 26 rooms. Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, no, it was. But in the back, and you may remember this, there's a petrol pump that stands in the back of the property, and it looks like a cowboy from the Western era of
Absolutely.
it looks like guns, guns in the holster where the petrol.
Absolutely.
And I
In fact,
photographed
a
that,
lot
and
of commies, there's other places in Kamieskroon look the same way. It's like a
yeah,
Midwestern North American town
it's
back in the days
got
of
that feel, the
cowboys.
tumbleweed coming through,
Right.
and that photograph's in my portfolio. It's actually a very
Is
popular
that right?
print,
Oh, that's very interesting.
and
Wow.
I'm going to, so I'll put it into this presentation for the viewers to see what I'm talking about. But besides the flowers, I mean, the Namakwalan flowers are incredible. For anybody who's never seen them, I mean, it is just a carpet of just festivity, of color and beauty, and it's so vast.
Well,
It
it
just
is.
runs for miles and miles and miles.
And
But
people make a huge mistake to go just for a weekend.
yeah,
The shortest time I've ever spent there in flower season is 2 weeks. That's the shortest.
yeah, at least
You go investigating and you just, the discoveries you make on the back roads.
it's incredible. But the question I want to ask is, besides the flowers, because there's so much more there. What else did you experience in that area? I mean, it was a very special, and is still a very special area to you.
Well, where I live in Canada, it's a very forested area.
Mm.
And I mean, it's also agricultural, but it big forests, and forestry is a big career opportunity and what's the word I'm looking for? Forest products. But
Right.
anyway, what I was going to say is that I can't understand it exactly, but I love deserts. I just totally love deserts. And like when you get up in Namibia, say in the area of Sossusvlei and so on,
Hmm.
I mean, and I went walking alone in the dunes on numerous occasions. I never worry about getting lost. I always could find my way. But I really, and also in the Richtersveld, where, I mean, this is really the south end of the Namib, but
Correct.
and it's not that there are dunes there, but there are these incredible rock formations. And there's an area in the Richtersveld called Koekerboom Kloof.
I know it as well.
Yeah, and that to me, when I go there, I just feel I'm going home. I'm going home. I'm going home. And every time I've been camping there many times, and when I leave, I haven't gone 3 kilometers until I just feel overcome with homesickness.
Sure.
I can't explain it, but it's as if maybe, I don't know, 1,000 years ago I lived there.
Okay. Yeah, that's.
I feel like I know the place. And the first time that I went into that area, I went just Carla and me. And we went up over Hellskloof Pass, and the road was incredibly awful. I mean, it was almost
It's always awful. That road is always awful. It gets washed away with a lot of the rains.
Yeah. Anyway, and when we got in there, she said, we pulled up the vehicle under a rock for the night, and she said, well, I'm going to make us a bite to eat, and why don't you go for a walk? So I set out around the huge triangular rock called Dituan. And anyway, there were these big rocks sitting out in the veld. And I came up to one and I kind of imagined what was on the other side of it. And I walked around this huge boulder, and what I had imagined was exactly what was there. And it really brought me up sharp. And so I kept going. There was another gigantic boulder, I mean, huge, massive boulder sitting in the felt. And again, I pre-visualized, and which one does, what's on the other side, walked around, and there it was. Like at that point, I turned around and I went back to Colin. I said to her, I said, "You know, I've never been here before, don't you?" She said, "Of course, that's why I brought you." And I said to her, "I know this place." And I said, "I know it really well." And that's, that to me was, it was a kind of one of the things I'm not going to go into it now, but I love reading and studying about consciousness.
Okay.
And why I could pre-visualize. It's not happened to me in any other situation I can ever recall.
Sure.
But it did that.
That is deep. And did you do much photography there, or was it just
I've
a
done a
place
great
of
deal of
solitude for you?
Oh, no, a great deal over the years. I can't remember how many times I've been into that area. Yeah.
Well, we went in there, and I was expecting to be quite productive in the Richtersveld. I really, I'd studied the area. As I said, a good friend of mine, Koos van der Lende, photographed that area for many years, and I'd seen some of his work, and I actually struggled. I really struggled to photograph there. The landscape was almost like from another planet.
It is.
And to the eye, it looked incredible. But the moment you brought the lens to it, I couldn't capture what I was feeling, and I really struggled. I got a couple of photographs I was happy with, but so I understand the connection you had and the feeling you had there, because it's got that spiritual feeling about it. It's just superb. And again, you have to go there to actually experience it for yourself. But So Freeman, moving on from the southern hemisphere and the dry areas and the dry areas of the Northern Cape and the Namib Desert and the prolific colors and flowers, we go back to your hometown. And in preparing for this discussion with you, I read through one of your articles that you had written, and very well written, by the way. You really have a gifting for writing, which is very obvious. But again, I would like to quote this if I could, and let me just get it here in front of me. You say over here, and this is specifically about subjects or familiar subjects itself and symbolic weight, as you put it. But you said over here that nearly every year when the first flakes of snow begin the visual transformation of what you call your rural landscape, you say, "Yeah, I find myself standing on my doorstep, camera lens pointed almost straight down. Anybody watching asks, 'What on earth are you photographing?'" So my question here is in two parts. The one is that you return to the same place you return to year after year, if I understand what you've written correctly. Something that I almost battle with, because I don't like revisiting places more than once. It's just a completely different mindset, I guess. And you say the same patch of gravel, and then you're able to actually photograph something new every time. So can you help me to understand that? What draws you back? What is the reason why you would go back to the same spot, basically connected to what you describe as, and you mention it as symbolic weight. And I'd like to also understand what you mean by symbolic weight, something that has deeper personal meaning, or a subject that holds something special for you. Can you explain both of those?
Sure. I just wanted to say that I brought with me here today a quote that I wanted to read to you. And
Okay.
it's by Anthony Stevens, who was from Oxford. He was one of the world's great psychotherapists. And he said, art,
Mm-hmm.
like the dream, is an emotionally loaded form of communication conducted through the use of symbols. Now,
And
I would really like to speak to that question, because the photography that matters to me is the photography that I do for me. In other words,
Right.
if I'm drawn to a subject, I like to stay with it until it's lost its pull. In other
Okay.
words, that may be for 10 minutes,
Mm.
it may be for, 5 hours, or I may go back repeatedly to that area.
Right.
And when I'm standing on my doorstep, my front doorstep, my driveway ends right there, and it's a gravel driveway. But there's
Okay.
little patches of grass in there as well. And there's nothing else. There's no, center of interest, point of dominance, or anything else. It's
Mhm.
all quite integrated. And then the flakes of snow come down. So I have the white tone of the snow. I
Right.
have the dark gray of the gravel, and then the mid-tone brown of the grasses. So I have the almost complete tonal range. Nothing
Right.
stands out. It's just a completely intricate weave.
Almost like camouflage, I guess.
Almost. But the point is, I love doing photographing situations like that. And the first time I became aware of how much I liked it was on the other side of my house a few years ago. And I was looking out from my kitchen window, and I saw the whole field look like that. I went on the back deck and made photographs. And after 5 or 10 minutes, photographing here and there, the back deck down at this field, which was the same grasses, little black shadows in that case, and mid-toned grasses. I was higher than a kite. I was just flying. So I came in the house, I made myself a cup of tea. I went back out, sat down on the chair, and I said, what's going on? And you know how sometimes when you ask yourself a question like that, you know the answer and you'll say it right away,
Yeah.
and then you think it's too foolish. You keep on going. Well, that happened to me that morning, but very quickly I said to myself, this field looks just like you'd like your life to look, integrated.
Oh,
And I said, oh, for
okay.
God's sake. And I kept on going. And then a few minutes later, I said, the field does look like I'd like my life to be. The white tones are all the wonderful things that have happened to me. They're everywhere, but they're different everywhere. The little black shadows was a cloudy, bright morning from the grasses. They're everywhere. And the mid-tone browns were showing through, and they're everywhere. It was just like a totally integrated spread. So that field, and when I stand at my doorway and point the lens down on the,
Yes.
as you described, that's what I'm photographing. I'm photographing integration.
Okay.
And look, am I an integrated person? Probably not, but more so than I was. And it's a lifelong challenge.
Okay.
And so, no, but I can give you another example. And it's a very powerful one. In 2000, I had not one, but 2 liver transplants, 5 days apart.
Oh, my goodness.
And
Okay.
the first one failed, so I was put into a coma. And anyway, I was in a coma for 6 weeks. And after 6 weeks, I know, when I woke up, my transplant surgeon told me that I'd won the national lotto 5 weeks in a row. He said, you shouldn't be here. but there I was. So anyway, a good many years later, I've taught workshops several times in Israel and
Right.
4 times in southern Israel, in a little moshav agricultural community called Faran. And on the desert floor there are just outside of Faran, there's about 1,000 fabric greenhouses. It's too hot for glass ones. So they have fabric, and they can have more fabric or less. When I was there in 2011, I would take the students in the workshop over there. We worked because it was a good place to study lines and shapes and so on. And I made photographs, and I liked it. When I went back in 2016, I could not stay away from those. And between workshops, I was there at dawn for a couple of hours, go back, have some breakfast, go back at noon. Over the noon hour, I'd be there for 2 or 3 hours, go back, have a rest in the afternoon, and go back at sunset. I couldn't stay away. Now, I was shooting digital by this point.
Right.
And I was deleting a lot of images as I went, but I returned to Canada with 3,300 digital files.
Okay.
What can you do with 3,300 digital files of fabric greenhouses? Nothing. So I did a very hard edit, and I got it down to 750.
Okay.
And then I have a print agent, and I knew I wanted to print some of these. And so I did a totally brutal edit and got it down to 75 images. In the process, I began to discover the symbol. In the end, I ended up with 8 photographs.
Right.
They tell the story of my first picture, represents me and my body about 1998, 99. It's ripped and torn fabric. That's me. And then there's a photograph of this mist, the skeleton of a greenhouse, and with gray mist and a black shroud fabric hanging down. And that represents me. I was about 2 weeks from dying when I got the transplants. And it was the skeleton. That's me, the skeleton of the greenhouse. And that black fabric was the shroud waiting to wrap my emaciated body.
Sure.
And then in the 8 pictures, it shows, it goes from near death into intensive care, all pictures of fabric, to my return to full health, and then finally just the energy pulsing through my body. And I've been a very healthy person in the 26 years since. So what I'm saying about this is when something grabs you like that, and that was, I've had many experiences like this, but none as powerful as that. You stay with it. You stay with it. Don't say, why? Shoot. Shoot. And in the editing process, usually, that's where you'll discover why that mattered to it.
When you're in that space, and I'm asking this because I something happens to me when I'm shooting, and I pretty much know that I'm on to something, even if I don't understand what it is. Do you also get that feeling in your tummy? It's like it's not butterflies, but it is.
Is it a certain excitement?
Yeah, it's almost like, it's not nerves. It's an excitement, but it's almost like a beautiful tingly feeling in the tummy that I can't explain, but it's like a creative bubbling. And when that starts to happen, the whole world around me closes down and time itself stops.
Absolutely.
And that's probably very similar to what you're saying. When you're in that moment, you're not sure why, but it feels right. So when you get back from a shoot like that, sorry, I interrupted there, but when you get back from having taken that many photographs under those conditions, do you leave your photographs one side just for the emotion, just to sort of die down before you start to look at your editing, or before you start taking it through a process of sort of culling out the ones you like versus the ones you don't, or do you get straight into it?
I think both of those things, but this time I had to take a long time. I had so many files to go through.
Mm.
And so I spent, over a period of, well, maybe even weeks before I ended up with the 75 that I sent off to my print agent, but the 8 for myself. When I got those 8, I said, that's why I could not stay away from those greenhouses, because the greenhouses were a symbol for my illness, my near death, and my full recovery.
Yeah. And when you are photographing in that space, just the depth of the emotion, I think, just brings out something so much more special in one's photography. So,
yeah.
It's funny. In my world, I've got to put my files away for 6 months, maybe a year. I cannot look. No, I can't look at them early, because the emotions for me are too high. So the fact that I was out there, the fact that I experienced that, the fact that the wind was blowing, the fact that there were smells around, the senses were working, the good feelings and all of that, that all seems to play a role in, and then I just find that I'd rather come back, I put them away, I forget about them. 6 months, a year later, I'll open them up. And of course, when I do, it's very similar to what you went through with these. I end up throwing so much away. I donated those files back to cyberspace for somebody else to use.
Right.
So it's so good to, when you hear other photographic artists' view, and also how you actually work through it. It's very refreshing indeed. Freeman, the last image of the 8, I know that's a special image to you, and you also have some symbolic, something symbolic that you can bring to it when it came to the circus. And would you tell everybody about that as well?
Well, in the last actually 3
it's the last 3, okay.
In the last 3 images, you see this red fabric. It's in the middle of the picture. It's tiny, small, and it gets wider and wider and wider and wider. And it's like, yes, I'm back. It's just like, and then the second last picture, it's like I'm performing in the circus, and there's wires there, and then the red fabric are like safety nets underneath. So out of hospital, and I'm immediately performing in the circle. And then the last one are of very red, yellow, and blue hues, and very strong tonal contrast as well. Strong lines throughout, and it's just like energy flowing. And that's been me pretty well ever since. If you photograph for yourself, and don't worry at all, but if anyone else likes your images, that's not important. If you're photographing and the making of the pictures matters to you, and some of the photographs you make matter to you deeply, you will develop you don't, how do I put it? You don't go searching for a style, the style finds you. Because you're being honest to yourself. Correct. Photograph what matters. If nobody else likes it, tough. I mean, we all that's ego. When someone else loves your picture, that makes you feel good, of course. And you hope that images you make have relevance for other people. But fundamentally, you must do what matters to you. And then that represents you in a very, I think, accurate way.
Correct. And it brings the more deeper emotive type of work out of you as well.
That's right.
Absolutely. I remember the day you came through to visit us here at the gallery, and we had an exhibition up of our masterclass students' work. And I remember you taking a lot of time to go through the exhibition. In fact, I was very impressed with the fact that you did, not just sort of gaze over it quickly. And before, or as you started looking at the work, I said to you, Freeman, if there's anything you want to know about any of these pieces that are up, I know these students so well. I've spent a number of years with each one of them. I know what they're thinking. I know what they tried, and I know how they produced the work. And you said to me, rather not. You didn't want to know anything about the piece. You didn't want to know the craft behind how it was created, but you wanted to spend some time with it. And that for me was very special. Do you want to maybe just enlarge on that? I have also a quote of yours. Your quote is this here. You say, the question why is central to art. The question how is central to craft. And then you say, art is conceived in our unconscious, in our imagination, our passions, our dreams. We use craft to give it birth. So that's the quote. And I think that quote is pertinent to the way I saw you enjoying the work that people had spent so much time putting together.
Because, and I think photographers, I mean, it's true of every medium, visual medium. I mean, they're, how do you do this? How do you do that? That's craft.
Yes.
Yes. But why you do it? Why am I pointing the camera down? The real issue is not how I made the photographs. The real issue is why I made the photographs. Why, once I identified that this kind of image, which is just a weave, a tapestry, with no dominant point or anything like that, matters to me. I don't care if anyone else likes it. It just speaks to something that it is a visible expression of something that is a deeply emotional need or whatever, this need for integration. And so when I remember so well that morning just looking at the various photographs of your students in the gallery, and it was very special. And I mean, obviously as I'm looking at them, I'm thinking, well, yeah, I don't even think I asked how very much of myself.
No, you didn't. You actually didn't ask one single piece. You didn't want to know how it was created.
Yeah.
But I did ask our students to put up a small brief on the piece and what it meant to them and why they created it. And you spent a lot of time reading that. But you didn't want to know how it was created. That didn't matter to you.
In a lot of photography magazines, they'll have underneath it Nikon camera, model, whatever.
Exactly.
250
shutter speed, aperture, ISO.
The most useless information in the world.
Exactly, I agree.
Totally useless.
I absolutely agree.
But I think one of the things, to a large degree, craft, in a sense, it precedes art, not the genesis of art, but obviously, if you don't know your tools, and if you don't know the building blocks, of visual design, like line, shape, depth, texture, and if you don't know how to, principles of composition, things that how you arrange lines and so on, you've got to know that in order to pull off the art, so to speak, to make the why visible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite correct. I mean, I remember reading your, and I can't tell you exactly which book it was in, but where you did discuss the concept of visual design. I remember you breaking it up into primary shapes, I think, if I recall correctly, and secondary shapes.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then broke that up into rhythm and pattern and
Well,
so
yeah,
on.
in language, we have, the two basic building blocks or parts of speech are the noun and the verb. You
Yes.
give me a noun and give me a verb, and I can make a
Mm.
statement, or
Mm.
I can ask a question. That's all I need.
Mm.
Everything else is a bit extra. Adjectives,
Mm.
adverbs, all of these things are modifiers or join things together. And
Yes.
it's exactly the same with visual design.
Yeah.
The noun and the verb of visual design are line and shape. Give
Yeah.
me a piece of paper or give me a white screen or anything,
Mm.
and I draw a line across. It can be a straight line, or it can be an undulating line, or a curving line.
Mm.
Immediately, I have two shapes. Okay, if I move the line this way, let's say it's a straight line, and I'm just driving from
Mm.
top to bottom. If I move the line this way, I've got a narrow rectangle over here and a much larger rectangle over there. It feels differently than if I have the line in the middle and have two equal rectangles, equal size. So line and shape are expressive. And a straight line makes us feel differently from a
Mm.
curving or an undulating line. And I remember in Namib, I illustrate this point in my workshops because one of the pictures are comparison shots. I was standing at the base of a big rock, and the breakers, the waves were coming in, smashing against the rock and coming up.
Mm.
And I did two shots, both of them at I think like a quarter of a second. So here's this black rock, and up come these straight lines in the first picture. In the second photograph, same composition, but this wave, they don't come straight up. The lines go. So
Okay.
immediately, just by looking at the lines, you know that the first wave was the stronger of the two waves.
Yes.
In other words, the curving line is expressing, oh, well, I've got more time, or I'm not so strong, I'm not feeling so well. You get that feeling from
Mm.
And-
More, in some cases, more peaceful,
and more
depending on your subject matter. Whereas your straight line is a lot more purposed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a line like this, or a line
Yeah.
like this, or a line like this. You have
Exactly.
an oblique line like
Yeah.
here, or even a diagonal from corner to corner, and
Yeah.
and that's always got thrust and dynamic.
Yeah.
to it.
Almost feels like it's in motion, I guess.
That's right.
It feels, yeah. Mm. That very interesting that visual design, I think, as a photographer, so not myself necessarily, but I'm talking about photographers in general, photographers, photographic artists, whatever we want to call them, that are listening to this talk now. For many of them, they've never experienced the design layer to their work or working with design. Yeah, but what they do experience usually is what is firstly taught, which is then the rules of composition. And for many of the photographers, they never really get out of the rules. So the rules will tend to dominate their work and almost make what I have seen their work a lot more predictable. Whereas I think, in my opinion, those rules should never be called rules. I think they should be called guidelines. And I think the layers that something like visual design can bring onto your work over and above that is just incredible. It can take your work from predictable to something that is exciting and worthy of looking at. Do you want to maybe comment on just your feeling on
Absolutely.
the rules of composition versus your...
Well, first of all, how can you compose if you haven't talked about what you're composing? You have to talk about lines. You have to know about shapes. You have to know about depth. You have to know about textures. Those are the four that I talk about in particular. But line and shape above all else. Then you can compose them. But if you've never talked, it's the same thing when you're in elementary school. You learn the parts of speech or the building blocks of speech. what's composition? Then you learn how to arrange them in sentences and in paragraphs. That's composition.
Right.
You don't start off talking about composition until you know what a noun is and a verb is.
Yeah.
So, and what they do. And it's exactly the same thing. Your example of people wanting to talk about composition without ever talking about the building blocks that they're composing or arranging.
Yeah.
They've left the first half out. So
Exactly.
then, and what you call guidelines, I call principles, same thing here.
Yes.
Rules are an insult. If I say this is like this ridiculous rule of thirds, it's like saying this. We've thought this all out ahead of time. This has been people thought it out over the decades and centuries. You just be a good boy, Martin, and you follow the rules. That's an insult to you.
And that's where we leave part 1. Next week in part 2, we go deeper into the rules of composition, Monier's influence on Freeman's creative vision, and his transition from film to digital. 3 conversations you do not want to miss. Subscribe to the Osner Studio Atelier below. You'll receive early access to new videos just like this, and you will always know what is coming up next. Until next week, part 2 of my discussion with Freeman Patterson. Stay creative. Why? Because it's just good for you. Cheers, everybody.